To the statement on the Defence Investment Plan, Secretary of
State. With your permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to make a statement on the Defence Investment Plan. Our armed forces represent the very best of us, from our sailors patrolling the high north and protecting the seabed, to our pilots, aircrew and air defence teams in the Middle East defending the skies, our paras in the South Atlantic and Marines in the Channel. And as I speak, we have personnel supporting the humanitarian mission in Venezuela, submariners beneath the waves maintaining our unbroken chain of protection, and planners, the permanent joint headquarters, making the most extraordinarily complex challenges appear routine. Our servicemen and women rightly inspire respect, gratitude and pride across this House and across the nation. We all recognise that they serve at an increasingly dangerous and unpredictable moment in history. Now, the central purpose of this Defence Investment Plan, which we published today, is to ensure that they have the kit and technology they need to do the difficult job that we ask of them. I know firsthand just how important that is, and when I was appointed Defence Secretary just a couple of weeks ago, I promised to get that right. Today, I make good on that promise. Now, before I set out that detail, I want to take the opportunity to thank the many hundreds of colleagues in the Ministry of Defence, in uniform and out, who have worked very hard to prepare this plan. Over the last few weeks, it's been a privilege to work with them, as it has been my ministerial team. In particular, I want to pay tribute to my honourable friend, the Minister for Defence, Readiness and Industry, who I know has invested many months in getting this plan right. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also want to place on the record my profound thanks to my right honourable friends, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, for their support and the spirit of goodwill which has guided our negotiations over the past fortnight. They have, for 2 years, demonstrated steadfast commitment to our national security, and our armed forces are today better prepared and better supported as a consequence of that. I think it's important to also make the point that Ukraine is still strong in the fight, and Britain, over the past 2 years, has proven itself to be a reliable ally and a trusted partner. I also pay tribute to my friend, the Right Honourable Member for Rawmarsh and Conisbrough, who dedicated his time as a Secretary of State and worked in order to deliver this plan. He set out to this House in clear terms why he could not support an earlier version of the plan. Madam Deputy Speaker, I will lay out what has changed and why I can. This plan now commits more investment in our armed forces, £298 billion over the next 4 years. That includes an additional £15 billion on top of last year's spending review settlement, of which most is extra day-to-day spending for training and improving availability of ships and aircraft to increase our warfighting readiness. That is £1.5 billion more than when I took up this job just a couple of weeks ago. This means that defence spending will now increase in real terms by 27% between 2023 and 2024 and 2029 and 2030. That is a bigger increase across a Parliament than any present member of this House has ever seen. It means the £74 billion allocated to our armed forces next year is now £20 billion more than the last year of the previous government. And it means by the end of this decade, the proportion of GDP spent on defence will now be higher than at any time during the last 30 years. Now, we've made some difficult but necessary decisions to fund this, but our fiscal rules have been upheld and day-to-day spending on frontline services has been protected. All departments were asked to contribute 1% of their capital budgets from this year, while those with larger resources, the DFT Roads budget and DESNES, were asked to make further contributions. Full details will be set out in a written ministerial statement today. And to reinforce this additional investment, this Labour government is announcing a new £50 billion defence export facility to support British defence firms to go out and win contracts across the globe. More money matters, of course it does, but so do the choices we make on how to spend it. And so, I have taken the decision to reprioritise a further £1 billion within the plan to ensure that it better reflects the way that war is waged today. It will provide our service personnel with the capabilities they need to deter and fight now and in the years ahead. The war in Ukraine has seen battlefield technology advance faster than at any time in our history, and few have done more to ensure our armed forces kept pace than my honourable and gallant friend, the member for Birmingham Selly-Oak. I thank him for his service and for the work that he did as a minister. He will know artificial intelligence, autonomy and uncrewed systems are no longer capabilities of the future. And through this dip, they will now receive the sustained investment that reflects their strategic importance. So today, we commit the UK's largest ever investment in drone warfare, £5 billion for strike, protector and surveillance drones across the Royal Navy, the Army and the RAF, anti-submarine vessels, uncrewed ground vehicles and fighter jets, a new uncrewed systems task force to rapidly develop and field new autonomous capabilities, and funding for Europe's biggest drone testing site, the Uncrewed Systems Centre in Swindon, which I opened on my very first day in the job. A project which owes thanks to the efforts of my honourable friend, the member for Swindon North. We will also invest nearly £2 billion to integrate our armed forces through a new digital targeting web, underpinned by the most advanced AI and software, cutting the time from decision to strike faster than ever before. £100 million for the Defence AI Task Force and another £115 million to raise our defences against the threats from AI. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, it would be reckless to ignore the lessons from Ukraine, but it is important to remember that we are not Ukraine. We are a member of NATO and a nuclear power, and just in this year, our armed forces have been deployed to the High North and the Middle East. They are now readying themselves for the prospect of regenerating Ukraine's forces and reopening the Strait of Hormuz. All the while, they protect our island home and retain the ability to respond to crises in dangerous and distant lands. Britain needs a flexible, hybrid, integrated, high-low force that can deter and fight across every domain. It's why we're committing £8.6 billion to the GCAP programme, proudly in partnership with our allies Japan and Italy. This next-generation stealth fighter jet, is in addition to the £1.1 billion Typhoon upgrade, and will ensure that our RAF retains control of the skies. We will invest £26 billion to fund the most extensive naval base upgrades for nearly half a century, including at Faslane, Portsmouth and Devonport. £790 million to protect the UK homeland and our overseas bases from air, drone and missile threats. £11 billion for munitions and weapons to increase UK stockpiles, including long-range strike capabilities, low-cost cruise missiles and one-way effectors. And by 2030, we will build at least 6 new energetics factories. Madam Deputy Speaker, today we commit £64 billion to fund Dreadnought and AUKUS submarines, a new warhead and other crucial nuclear work. Our independent nuclear deterrent is the ultimate guarantee of our security. And in providing the funding to renew it, we extend that promise long into the future. We will also purchase F-35As and join NATO's nuclear mission. Because our security is now contested in every domain, we will invest over £3 billion in space capabilities, £2.5 billion in cyber and £400 million to protect our undersea cables and pipelines. But Madam Deputy Speaker, in the end, it is our people who win wars and preserve peace. With 3 above-inflation pay rises, extending childcare provision and putting fully into law the Armed Forces Covenant, this Labour government has demonstrated its commitment to what matters most. Building on the work already done to fix 1,200 of the worst homes, we today commit £9 billion over a decade to raise the condition of military family housing to a standard which matches the service and sacrifice of those living in them. Through a new Defence Housing Service, we will implement the Defence Housing Strategy in full, fulfilling our moral obligation to personnel and to their families. The DIP represents significant progress in implementing the vision set out in our Strategic Defence Review. We will invest more, target better, but there is much more work to be done. And not for nothing, the UK made a promise to our allies, as they did to us, 3.5 by 35. And in a more dangerous world, our commitment to NATO is absolute. I gave my word to the Secretary-General and to all our allies that promise will be met and a credible plan will be produced to ensure that it is. We will reach 3% in the next Parliament, with funding set out at the next spending review in which defence will be the #1 priority. Britain has always met our NATO spending commitments, and under this government, we always will. Britain has always stood with our allies, and under this government, we always will. This plan accelerates deep precision strike weapons and close support artillery with Germany. It creates an amphibious combined fleet with the Netherlands. We will also invite Jeff nations to join our Northern Navies initiative and build a hybrid force together. Madam Deputy Speaker, I now have a responsibility to make this plan work, not least given what Cabinet colleagues have forgone from their budgets in order to support mine. My commitment to them, and indeed the British public, is that with the requirement to spend more on defence comes a duty to spend more wisely on defence. So this plan includes a pledge to make substantial savings by the end of this Parliament, as well as a commitment to drive down fraud and error across defence. I am grateful to our partners in industry for their counsel and for their support during this process. I know that recent months haven't been easy, but with the DIP now published, I am relying on the full spectrum of our industrial base to make it a success. Primes and SMEs, workers and trade unions, innovators and investors. Together, we will ensure that the benefits of this plan will be felt right across the United Kingdom. We will develop sovereign and dual-use technologies, increase exports, generate growth and re-industrialise our economy. And today, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am proud to confirm that with the publication of the DIP comes the promise of greater security for families and new opportunities for our people. According to MOD analysis, this plan will support nearly 60,000 additional good and skilled jobs right across our union. This will be achieved alongside a culture shift in procurement. Madam Deputy Speaker, ultimately the success of this defence investment plan will be measured by whether it commands the support of those amazing men and women who serve in our armed forces. They remain our most important asset, respected by those who stand with us, feared by those who stand against us. We know that they are equal to any task, and with this defence investment plan, we give them the means to match their courage. I commend this statement to the House.
Secretary of State, it is good form to let the Speaker's office know if one is going to speak over the allocated time. I will now have to give extra time to the other front benches as well. Shadow Secretary of State, James Cartley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, after months and months of delay, finally we have the Defence Investment Plan, but it's quite simply a case of too little, too late. Too little because there's virtually no more cash than the plan, which led the previous Secretary of State to resign because he believed it would make the country, and I quote, less safe. Too late, not just because the plan is months overdue, but also because much of the capability it contains won't be in service until the 2030s, when the threat we face is right now. For members opposite who don't agree that this plan is too little, They don't need to take my word for it. The Chief of the Defence Staff said he needed £28 billion to fund the armed forces over the next 4 years. This plan is barely half that requirement. And their own Secretary of State for Defence, until a few weeks ago, said that the proposed spending, and I quote, falls well short of what is required for defence and the country at this dangerous time. Because, he said, and I quote, it rises to just 2.68% of GDP in 2030. 2.68% of GDP, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I ask the Secretary of State to confirm that the GDP figure for defence in 2030 under his revised plan remains unchanged, 2.68%? Exactly. Which begs the obvious question. If 2.68% by 2030 was a resigning matter for the previous Defence Secretary, why is it good enough for him? Yeah. But this dip is not just too little financially, it's too late. For members opposite who don't agree, they should remember that it was promised for last autumn and is now 10 months overdue. Most importantly, the drones Labour promised in today's headlines mainly enter service in the 2030s, when the threat we face is today. Autonomous drones to fly with the Apache, uncrewed surface and underwater vessels, the prototype for the RAF's autonomous fighter jet, all entering service in the 2030s, far too late in this fast-changing world of tech-driven warfare. On that subject, it was ironic that the Prime Minister announced the dip at Malloy Aeronautics in Maidenhead, where I also launched the MOD's first ever defence drone strategy back in February 2024. But back then, we were world leaders in drone warfare, having supplied Ukraine with cutting-edge drone capabilities that were not on a press release, but real kit used on a real front line against Europe's peer military threat, the Russian armed forces. So what happened? Labour came to power and put all that progress on hold, paralysing procurement, whilst we waited first for the Strategic Defence Review and then for the dip. But the big question, why all the dither and delay? In a word, money. Isn't the harsh truth that those drones could come into service far sooner, but the government are unwilling to commit the cash before the 2030s? Isn't this the inevitable result of a Prime Minister unwilling to cut welfare, prioritising a bigger benefits bill over properly funding defence? Which begs the next question, Madam Deputy Speaker. Where's the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield in all this?
Where is it?
Can the Secretary of State tell us if the putative Prime Minister has been consulted on the dip, and most importantly, has he given it his blessing? If not, is the dip even worth the paper it's written on? Madam Deputy Speaker, it is rumoured that the current Prime Minister may have ambitions to be the next Secretary-General of NATO. If this is true, might it have been advisable to include in the dip a funded plan to get to 3% on defence? So can the Secretary of State tell us in which financial year Labour will spend 3% on defence? And finally, for all the focus on drones, our people remain our most important capability. Not just our regular personnel, our reserves and their families, but our cadets and our veterans. Now, I was proud to make the decision to buy back the Defence Estate from Annington, a deal the previous Labour government left untouched. But given that I thought we all wanted to deliver homes for heroes, Madam Deputy Speaker, can he confirm, it's a critical question, it's about the accommodation of those who serve our country, can he confirm that the Defence Investment Plan includes cutting hundreds of millions of pounds from the budget for forces housing, shifting it from this Parliament into the 2030s? Can he confirm that's the case? And can he confirm that he is also cutting cadet funding at the same time and over the same time period? Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, on veterans, and I hope he's had a chance to think about this after my previous question, does he agree that a top priority for the new Prime Minister must be to back our former soldiers and scrap the Northern Ireland Trumpets bill? To conclude, after months of dither and delay, it's taken the sudden end of his premiership for the Prime Minister to finally publish the dip in a desperate search for a legacy. But it's a legacy of failure. An underfunded defence investment plan, too little, too late. The men and women of our armed forces deserve much better.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Shadow Defence Secretary talks about legacy. So let me remind him that under the previous government, The previous government cut back by almost 50,000 our service personnel. The morale of our troops was through the floor. 46 of the biggest 52 projects were delayed or over budget. And there was an equipment plan without the funding to back it up. I'm also, I have to say, quite perplexed that he wants to raise concerns about the announcement that we've made with regard to drones. We've just literally announced the largest ever investment in drones in our country's history. And when he gets the time, and I know because he will want to look carefully at the detail, he will see that over the past 2 weeks, we've reprioritised activity in order to bring forward spend so that we can deliver operational capability sooner than otherwise would be the case. He did mention housing, and I understand why he would want to raise that, because housing is hugely important for defence and for the armed forces community, and I know what it's like to live in armed forces accommodation. And I said in my earlier remarks that we absolutely have a moral responsibility to those who serve to ensure that we are able to provide them with the best possible living accommodations. That is why we have recommitted today to £9 billion of investment over the next 10 years. That will see investment in the housing estate growing each year in real terms over the next 10 years. That is an absolute commitment that we've made today. He also mentioned, and I understand again why he chose to do so, the importance of cadet forces. All of us in our constituencies will no doubt engage with cadet forces. They are an absolute force for good in communities around the country. And that is why we've made a clear commitment to continue to invest and modernise in our cadet forces to continue to improve outstanding opportunities for young people. He asked specifically about the percentage of GDP that we will be spending on defence. I would just gently point out to him that when we came into government 2 years ago, we inherited a figure of 2.3%. That was the figure that we inherited. It's currently at 2.5% and will be at 2.7% by the end of this Parliament, with a clear commitment to spend 3% in the next Parliament and an absolute critical commitment to spend 3.5% by 2035. The member opposite will have heard the points that I made about the importance of defence spending and the commitment that this government has made to ensuring that defence spending is the #1 priority at the next spending review.
Healy.
Thank you, Speaker. We all want this defence investment plan to be a success, and can I personally thank the MOD officials who have worked so hard for many months to get us to this point, and can I welcome the extra money the Treasury may have seeded in the last couple of weeks. It builds on what has been the record increase in defence investment that we as a Labour government have made since the election. Yeah. But threats are still growing. Demands on defence are still rising in this dangerous world. And today's step means that we will be spending as a nation 2.7% of GDP on defence in 2030, the date that NATO now warns we could face a Russian attack. So with European security at stake, would my right honourable friends agree that more needs to be done in the months ahead, beyond the dip, to develop a clear, credible funding plan that will hit 3% and that will meet our NATO commitment of 3.5% by 2035?
Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for his service in government. He did an excellent job as Defence Secretary, and I aim absolutely to build on the work that he did. I know that he will share the pride that this government has in the commitment that we have already made, £298 billion over the next 4 years, £15 billion of new money in this plan, and with an increase in defence spending in real terms by 27% up to 2930. But he's right, we do need to do more. We will need to spend more on defence, and that's why there was a clear commitment that that will be a #1 priority at the next spending review. We have an absolute obligation to our armed forces and to our allies. When I talk to my NATO allies, they look to the United Kingdom for leadership. That is leadership that we have provided over a number of years, including under the previous government, but it is a leadership that this government will continue to provide.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson James McCleary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement, albeit 14 months late and one Defence Secretary later. The Liberal Democrats welcome investment in technologies reshaping warfare in Ukraine and beyond. Our armed forces must be more agile and better equipped to the threats we face. But let's be clear. This defence investment plan is too little, too late. After years of Conservative neglect, Britain needed a government willing to match the scale of the challenge. Instead, we've had months of delay and now a plan that still appears to have a significant gap between the ambition and the resources required. It is hugely concerning to see how little, in particular, is allocated to air defence, hundreds of millions short of what was recommended in the Strategic Defence Review, inadequate to protect our islands and, indeed, our allies. The Prime Minister himself has warned that Russia could pose a direct threat to NATO by 2030. Yet the architects of the Strategic Defence Review, General Sir Richard Barrons and former Labour Defence Secretary and NATO Secretary-General Lord Robertson, have both made clear that the current funding is not enough. Just weeks ago, the Defence Secretary resigned because he believed the funding settlement offer was not sufficient to keep Britain safe. The new settlement does not bridge that gap, and yet the new Defence Secretary claims it is enough. So were both the experts and the former Defence Secretary wrong about this? Or does the Defence Secretary truly believe this is enough funding to keep Britain safe? Liberal Democrats have welcomed plans to sort out the sorry state of forces housing. So it is really concerning to hear reports that funding is being found by raiding existing defence budgets, including for military housing. If that is true, what message does the Secretary of State have for serving personnel and their families still living in mouldy homes? Is this genuinely new investment or simply moving money from one overstretched budget to another? Madam Deputy Speaker, the last thing our armed forces and defence industry need is more uncertainty. Between delays to the DIP, a change of defence ministers and now a new Prime Minister incoming, they have already dealt with a lot. It is reported that the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield, who looks certain to become the Prime Minister in the coming weeks, is sympathetic to the Liberal Democrat plan for defence bonds. Despite the Prime Minister appearing to rule it out in his speech today, can the Secretary of State confirm whether defence bonds are at least under consideration to provide the injection of funding our armed forces so desperately need?
Secretary of State.
I would just gently say to the honourable member opposite that when his party was in coalition government with the Conservative Party, defence was cut by 22%. So we're all judged by our record and by the actions that we take. And today's defence investment plan represents a real terms increase in defence spending by, he can shake his head, but it is a statement of truth that this plan, which represents 298 billion of investment over the next 4 years, represents an increase in real terms by 27% by 2030. He spoke about housing. I hope that he heard the words that I spoke earlier about the absolute commitment to our armed forces to make sure that they've got a standard of accommodation that is absolutely fitting for the nature of the service that they undertake. That's why we've made a commitment of £9 billion over 10 years. I remember living in armed forces accommodation that hadn't been properly maintained. We have a duty and a responsibility to do so, and that's why we're investing a very significant amount of money. He spoke about defence bonds. Of course, we will look at all suggestions that people have about how we can do things differently, but in the end, all of this money has to be accounted for, and we have to be responsible in terms of bringing forward a defence investment plan that is properly costed. That is what we have done. We have brought forward very significant amounts of resource. But he said that I claimed it was enough. I think that's slightly unfair of him to characterise my earlier remarks in that regard. I am crystal clear about the fact that today represents a massive investment in our armed forces and in our technology that they will be deploying and employing. But that is not to say that we don't need to do more. We do need to do more, and that's precisely why I made the point that we need defence spending to be the #1 priority at the next spending review.
Thank
you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank the Secretary of State and his collective team for all of the work that's gone into the Defence Investment Plan. I also welcome the increase in spending. There are a multitude of lessons from Ukraine that we've all heard much about. One is on scale and capacity, and both Russia and Ukraine's industrial capability of where they're now building 1.1 million drones every 2 months. Could the Secretary of State outline to the House the percentage of the defence budget, and particularly the equipment plan that has been spent on uncrewed systems, and whether that is docked into the defence industrial strategy.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable and gallant friend for the work that he has done in this particular area, and I know that he has a particular percentage in mind, and I'm keen to discuss it more with him. I hope that he will acknowledge today, though, that this dip brings forward the largest ever investment in drone warfare, 150 million more for Homeland counter-drone defences, 50 million more over the next 12 months for the Army's Task Force Rapstone, 150 million for a new uncrewed vehicle programme for the Army, 150 million for the Royal Marine Commandos with the same hybrid model of crewed and autonomous insertion craft and drones. So I hope that he will acknowledge that over the past couple of weeks there has been a refocusing, a sharpening of the plan in order to ensure that we learn the lessons from Ukraine. But I know, because he's been around the block a bit, that he will also understand that whilst we must learn the lessons from Ukraine, we are not Ukraine, and we still have other responsibilities as a major power within NATO. And that's why what I have to do is make sure that we've got a balanced set of capabilities, and I'm confident that that is the balance that we've achieved today.
Father of the House, Rugby.
Many wonder whether aircraft carriers are going to go the way of the old battleships, uniquely vulnerable to drones costing a tiny fraction of their cost. But to protect aircraft carriers, you need destroyers and frigates. Moreover, in 2 world wars, we relied completely on destroyers and frigates to protect our food supply. So will the Secretary of State say more about the replacement of our ageing frigate and destroyer fleet, particularly with regard to Type 45 and Type 83 destroyers?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to the Father of the House, not least because it gives me the opportunity to pay tribute to all of those who serve at sea, doing extraordinary work in the service of the Royal Navy. As an island nation, the capabilities that they provide are mission critical for us. And that's why between now and the end of 2030, we expect the Royal Navy to take delivery of 5 new warships and the final Astute-class attack submarine. And in the same period, we will bring our first large autonomous surface and subsurface autonomous platforms into service. Those who serve in the Royal Navy do exceptional work on behalf of our nation, and we will make sure that they have the resources and the capabilities that they need to keep our country safe.
Select Committee Chair, Dandes.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for the ministerial briefing beforehand and for allowing Defence Committee members advance sight of the Defence Investment Plan. I welcome also that we now have a fully funded plan backed by Treasury, which is scalable for key facets such as housing, training, workforce recovery, AI, housing, integrated air and missile defence and munition stockpiles. However, there is no clear pathway to reach 3% of GDP spend. And despite assurances that the DIP would go further than previous defence equipment plans, it actually contains less detail. There is no full 10-year expenditure plan. There is no breakdown between procurement and support costs. And much of the investment appears to be backloaded beyond 2030. So can my right honourable friend commit to fight for more funding for defence so that we reach the 3% of GDP spend by 2030? Will he commit to building more in Britain to stimulate sovereignty and economic growth? Also, thirdly, what operational risks have been accepted in the interim while there are being cuts to investment in certain areas, and when will our committee be furnished with the full details so that effective parliamentary scrutiny can be undertaken?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the Chair of the Select Committee for the scrutiny that I know that he will apply to this important piece of work. He reeled off a number of different capabilities, and I'm very happy to discuss those with him in more detail. The essence of his question was seeking an assurance that I will commit to fight for the funding that defence needs. Of course, I will give him that commitment. It is my job now to make sure that we've got the resources that we need to field the kind of capabilities required to keep our country safe at a point of great challenge. That does involve working very closely with our NATO allies. That does involve providing them with the certainty of our long-term commitment towards defence funding. And it will require us to show a trajectory to the 3.5% commitment that we have made. He's also right to raise the point about backing Britain. The Prime Minister, the Chancellor and other ministerial colleagues have been absolutely clear that whilst, of course, we need to provide additional resource in order to provide the capabilities we need, but we also need to do that in a way which ensures that we are best able to grow our economy and create and sustain good, well-paid defence jobs right around the United Kingdom. That is an absolute priority for me, and I give him an assurance that we'll work closely with him on it.
Julie Lewis.
At last we have agreement on a defence expenditure statistic when the Secretary of State says that what the settlement means is by the end of this decade, the proportion of GDP spent on defence will now be higher than at any time during the last 30 years. He's quite right. The trouble is, if you go back 30 years to 1995, what we were spending then under the new accounting rules was 3% of GDP. And that was 6 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Given that we are now in a more dangerous situation today than at any time since at least the height of the Cold War in the 1980s, shouldn't we be looking at the sort of percentages we spent then? Under the new accounting rules, that was between 4.1% and 5.5%. Haven't we still got a long way to go?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman knows that I always listen very carefully to what he has to say, not least because he talks a lot of good sense on these matters. And I remember over many years him being sat on this side of the House, me sat on that side of the House, listening to the case that he has made over a very long period of time for investment in defence, including investment in nuclear. And I know, therefore, that he will welcome the 63 billion over the next 4 years to strengthen the UK's nuclear deterrent. He's spoken with great consistency on these matters over many, many years. He's right to say that there is still work to do in order to point the trajectory to 3.5%. I think today is a very significant step forward in terms of providing additional resource and additional capability. The 298 billion is a very significant commitment by this government. When we came into office 2 years ago, the percentage of GDP was at 2.3%. We have increased that. We're on a trajectory to increase it over the next few years, and we need to make sure that through the next spending review process, we've got the resource that I think most honourable and right honourable members agree that we now need to chart that course to 3.5%. That is an absolute commitment that we will honour, and we will work closely with our NATO allies in order to do so.
Wes Streeting.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Of course, this government wouldn't have such an uphill mountain to climb were it not for the decisions taken by our predecessors. And I really think the Conservatives would have more credibility if they acknowledged that fact more readily and with more humility than they've shown today and on every previous occasion the Shadow Secretary of State's been at the dispatch box. Nonetheless, as the Secretary of State himself has acknowledged, we do need to go further, we do need to go faster, and what we have here is a good foundation to build on, but there's more to do. With that in mind, can the Secretary of State set out the government's rationale for not joining the Defence, Security and Resilience Bank, and will he reconsider?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. I mean, we will look carefully at the best possible mechanisms in order to ensure that we've got the resource that we need to field the capability that is required. There are different views about how best to do that, and there are different allies advocating for different ways of investing money in our defence industries. I know that he will understand that I've not had a huge amount of time in a couple of weeks that I've been drawing this plan together to map out the longer term spending proposals in terms of how we best generate that activity across defence and with our economy. I'm not ruling anything out or ruling anything in, but I will look closely at what our allies say, take advice, and very happy to discuss it with him further.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It would appear that this defence investment plan is unaffordable, but the PAC will be examining that fact. Deep in this plan is an old accountant's trick, an efficiency savings figure, a vast efficiency savings figure of 10.7 billion. Does the plan rely on that figure? If not, what is the incentive to make efficiency savings over the plan?
The plan is affordable, and that is one of the differences between this government and the last. But I welcome the scrutiny that he will no doubt apply to it. We've looked very carefully, as honourable members would expect, at how we are able to fund this. And what nobody on this side of the House wanted to do was bring forward spending commitments that we weren't able to evidence how we're going to pay for them. That's what we've done, but very happy to discuss it with him further.
Michelle Scroggin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome that this government is prioritising the delivery of our nuclear deterrent, including investment not only in the current, but those all-important future submarine programmes. Now, the Shadow Secretary of State has said too little too late. Well, the price that the Liberal Democrats demanded for the coalition government of 2010 was not renewing our nuclear deterrent, and the Conservatives were happy to pay that price. So yes, they're really bloody late. Part of the cost of that decision is being paid by our submariners, forced to remain at sea for over 200 days in that ageing fleet. Now, we've got to be honest with the people of Great Britain. Our food supply chains are being tested, our energy infrastructure is being mapped, our MOD is under a cyber attack every day. If we're not telling the truth, would the Secretary of State agree that they would be more willing to go with those really difficult decisions if we were actually honest with them?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. She does a fantastic job representing her constituents, and I pay tribute to the incredibly important work that they do on behalf of the nation. I'm very keen to come and visit her constituency. I look forward to continuing these conversations with her. She's right to make the points in the way that she has done. The nuclear deterrent is an absolutely vital capability that underpins our national security, and we're hugely grateful to all those who make that happen on behalf of the nation, including, of course, her constituents.
Andrew Morrison.
Madam Deputy Speaker. The Daring class and Sea Viper are due to be retired from the mid-2030s, and the plan is, as I understand it from the DIP, that the Common Combat Vessel and its slave drone vessels, the Type 91 and 94, will come in to replace it as our principal means of doing hybrid maritime air defence. Given that that simply is a concept at this stage, little more than a concept, what confidence does the Secretary of State have that we will not still be reliant upon the Daring class, and has he made contingency for extending her in service so that we're not left undefended?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to him, and I'd be very happy to have a more detailed conversation with him offline about the points that he made. He will know that there is a massive programme of transformation that's been set out by the First Sea Lord in recent times. Clearly, we're working through the detail of all of that to ensure and satisfy ourselves that we've got the right capabilities. But as I said earlier, I do want to take the opportunity to pay tribute to all of those who serve in our armed forces, particularly those who serve at sea in the way that he described. This is an important capability, and we will make sure that we've got the right capabilities in the right place at the right time.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've had the opportunity to oversee or look over the defence equipment plan over the last 13 or so years, and we see repeatedly a profiling over a decade with huge optimism that savings and efficiencies will come down the line, and that's how it gets across the line of affordability. So will the Secretary of State commit to making sure that there's proper parliamentary scrutiny of this through the Public Accounts Committee, the Defence Select Committee, and hopefully next week, if the ministers can be agreed to attend, to come to a meeting of the Treasury Select Committee with Defence Select Committee colleagues from both the Treasury and the Ministry of Defence?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to the chair of the Select Committee who makes important points. I know that she will have heard my earlier comments about the requirement when spending more on defence to also spend more wisely. And I am acutely conscious of the reputation of defence procurement spending going back generations. We absolutely do need to do much better, and we are on a process of transition to ensure that we do. I'm very keen to work closely with her and her committee to make sure that they have the opportunity to provide the scrutiny on behalf of this House that I think would be constructively helpful to the process. And the Minister for Defence Readiness and Industry will be very pleased to appear in front of her committee next week.
Barclay.
The Strategic Defence Review highlighted the importance of the active reserve, but the Defence Investment Plan shows there's no increase at all in numbers this Parliament. It's not even mentioned, remarkably, in the land section. And even the commitment on something like Connect made less than a year ago, in August last year, has been shelved. So can the Secretary of State at least confirm to reservists watching this that their reserve service days this year will be fully protected?
Secretary of State.
Grateful to him, not least because it provides the opportunity to pay tribute to those who serve in our reserves, whom I am in awe that they are able to balance their commitment to our nation with other professional occupations and family life. And that is a commitment that is hugely valued by this government, as I know it was by the previous one. There is, I think from memory, a reference in, I think, page 62 of the People section. I'm advised, but I can tell him that essentially we will maintain the vision as set out in the SDR, but we want to do everything that we can to make sure that those people who want to step forward and serve in the reserves have an opportunity to do so.
Lewell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his statement. I do worry, though, that scrapping the Type 83s that were due to replace our Type 45 destroyers and be the backbone of our fleet in favour of a hybrid, uncrewed, autonomous navy is a gamble. Unmanned service vessels of this size are untested, especially in the High North. I recognise the immense potential for the new hybrid navy fleet in persistently monitoring the Russian threat, but can my right honourable friend assure me that unmanned and disaggregated replacements for our Type 45 destroyers will be as effective in providing not just strike capabilities, but the deterrent presence needed as well?
Well, I'm grateful to her. And of course, we need to make sure that we learn the lessons from Ukraine and elsewhere in terms of the kind of capability that we field. I think in terms of the specific capability that she's referenced, there wasn't a budget line attached to it. And therefore, as part of the transition to the hybrid navy, the First Sea Lord has set out an alternative vision for how we're going to field that kind of capability. But hopefully she will see from the investment and the commitment that we've made through the Defence Investment Plan that we are absolutely committed to ensuring that as an island nation we retain the Royal Navy capabilities that we need now and in the future. They are vital to the defence of our nation, and we will always make sure that we've got the right kit in the right place at the right time.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Defence Investment Plan includes an additional £100 million transformation of the Royal Marines Commando Forces, with a special focus on our allies in Scandinavia and the High North. With the Royal Marines Commando Logistic Regiment based at Royal Marines Base Chivenor in my constituency of North Devon, can the Secretary of State tell us what form that transformation will take?
Well, can I thank him for his service? And I know that he has constituency interests in these matters. I think he might have been referring to the £150 million that has been announced for the Royal Marine Commandos in terms of the hybrid model of crewed and autonomous insertion craft and drones, a bit of a mouthful. This is important capability, and it also provides me with the opportunity, and I have made this point previously, but I'd like to reiterate it, to say what an extraordinary job Royal Marines did in the English Channel a couple of weekends ago, interdicting a Russian Shadow Fleet vessel. We owe them a huge debt of gratitude. They do extraordinary work, and this government has a huge responsibility to make sure that they've got the right capabilities. Either myself or one of my ministers would be very happy to discuss the technical detail further, though.
Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. £63 billion this investment plan lays out this country will spend on our nuclear deterrent over the next few years. But that's not just to keep the UK safe. We offer that as an umbrella protection across our European NATO allies. That is a massive point. It's extremely expensive. It's more than some entire government departments will get. And it's huge, and we should celebrate it. So can the Secretary of State assure me that when he travels to Turkey for the NATO Assembly soon, and he travels with the Prime Minister, when we do come under some pressure, because we haven't laid out how we're going to hit 3% soon enough, that point is made gently to our friends and allies that actually we are spending a huge amount of money keeping them safe.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable and gallant friend. I think he does make an important point, and it's right to emphasise that in the context of NATO, we are the third largest spenders of resource on defence spending. He's right to point out about the 63 billion that's been committed over the next 4 years. That is a very large figure and it's a very significant commitment. But as he will know very well, not least because his constituents benefit from that investment, it also means good, skilled jobs for people right around the country, including in his constituency.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Deputy Speaker, isn't the reality, I say to the Secretary of State, that the plan that is put forward barely scrapes into 2.7%, not 3%, and leaves us £9.3 billion short every single year of this process? And I say to him that with all of that and not achieving our target, how in heaven's names does he think, if he's not going to achieve 3% in the period that he was asked for, 2030, how is he ever going to achieve the NATO minimum, de minimis, of 35? It's not going to happen. In 35, he will not get 3.5% out of this budget, won't he? Will he give us the dates?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't agree with the right honourable gentleman. The Defence Investment Plan represents a very significant commitment from this government into defence spending, nearly 300 billion over the next 4 years, 15 billion of new money within this plan. And he's heard the point that I've made about the real term spending increase by 27%. I've been very clear about the need to spend more on defence. And I've been very clear about the fact that it will be the next spending review that will provide the resource required to chart the trajectory from 3% to 3.5%. I agree with him. That is precisely what our allies want to see. And I'm confident that we will make good on that commitment in the context of the next spending review.
Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today is a step forward and a down payment on the future of towns like mine in Aldershot and Farnborough. But as much as we wrangle over percentages of GDP, on the ground we still lack the industrial capacity to actually spend this money and build more. Defence companies in my patch and across the supply chain cannot access the finance they need to hire more people and expand production, which is why I've been campaigning for over a year for the UK to join the Defence Security and Resilience Bank. Does the Secretary of State recognise this challenge, and what are we going to do to increase our industrial capacity?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and it was an absolute pleasure to be in her constituency at the weekend for Armed Forces Day. Aldershot is the home of the British Army, and she's done a fantastic job representing her constituents and her constituency. She's right to raise the point in the way that she does about defence finance. And I can tell her and the House that the defence finance and investment strategy will be published in the autumn.
Dave Dugan.
Deputy Speaker, this defence investment plan is 300 days late and £13 billion short. It ensures we fall further behind our allies and a greater exposure to those that would seek to do us harm, and it leaves us falling short of our NATO commitments. But that £13 billion is just 1 year of the defence nuclear enterprise cost, £13 billion. As the Secretary of State seeks to fund his plans from the Scottish Government's budget, amongst many other departmental budgets, what savings has he sought to make from the defence nuclear enterprise, which is the ultimate case of fur coat and nae knickers?
Secretary of State.
Well, firstly, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me acknowledge the very important contribution that Scotland makes to our national security. And he should know that billions of pounds of UK investment is going into Faslane and to other capabilities that will provide benefit in terms of growth and jobs for his constituents and people right across Scotland. I would just gently say to him that I wonder perhaps what the Defence Investment Plan would be for an independent Scotland, which is what he would want.
Narendra Mishra.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State is right to say that the benefits of this plan will be felt right across the UK, increase exports, generate growth and re-industrialise our economy. I'm proud to represent KNDS in Stockport. They manufacture military bridges and armoured vehicle Boxer, and the Minister for Defence Readiness visited me in October for a factory tour. I'm grateful to him. Can the Secretary of State ensure that the benefits of this investment are felt right across the UK, including in Stockport, Greater Manchester? And Stockport is just a short drive from Barnsley. Will he join me on a visit to KNDS?
Just a yes, Secretary of State.
I'm very grateful to him for the representations he's made on behalf of KNDS, and I understand well the important work that they do. He's right to emphasise the importance of ensuring that this very significant investment, this new £15 billion sitting alongside the other continuum of investment that we've seen, does need to provide economic growth and jobs right across the country. And that, Madam Deputy Speaker, is what it will do. It will provide nearly 60,000 new jobs. That is something that we should be hugely proud of, not least because a very significant proportion of those jobs will be spread right around the country. In terms of visiting his Stockport constituency, I'd be very pleased to do that.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. More money for defence is a good thing, so I welcome the Secretary of State's Defence Investment Plan. He did, though, say, in terms of 3.5%, that I'm confident that we will make good on that commitment in the next spending review. And I don't know why he's so confident, because the current Prime Minister won't be the Prime Minister, the current Chancellor won't be the Chancellor, and dare I say it, the current Secretary of State may not be the current Secretary of State. And so he would be able to give us, industry, our enemies, the markets, the whole country a great deal more confidence if he would answer the question from the Shadow Secretary of State and tell us whether the member for Makerfield has signed this off.
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can be confident because I can have confidence in the long-standing record and history of Labour governments investing in defence. It's that gives me confidence.
Jonathan Davies.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this record investment in defence, and I appreciate that this may lead us to making cuts elsewhere in public expenditure. One casualty may be the expansion of the A38 in Derby, which was on and off under successive governments for the last 40 years. Now, some local people would welcome that scheme not going ahead, particularly on environmental grounds, but others will see that cancellation as a brake on economic growth. Now, we need economic growth to fund our defence, so will the Secretary of State work with me to influence the Treasury and DFT that we need more investment in Derby so that our economy is thriving and we can contribute to defence through public expenditure in the future?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to him. Tough choices have had to be made. And as I mentioned earlier, Treasury colleagues will set out the detail of the spending choices today in a written ministerial statement. I know that he will understand that given the nature of the world in which we're operating, the government has an absolute responsibility to ensure that we make those tough choices, we reprioritise resource and activity in order to best safeguard the security of our nation. That is what we've had to do in this defence investment plan. That has involved some tough choices, but that is the right way to proceed.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I just return to the question of the efficiency savings that are forecast to be made in this document? 10.7 billion, which is 7 billion out of resource spending and 3.7 out of capital. And apart from some very vague headings, there is no indication in this document about where that money is going to be saved. Can he do a written statement as soon as possible to set out exactly how these savings are going to be made? Or I rather agree with the Right Honourable Lady, the Chairman of the Treasury Select Committee, that we've all seen these accounting tricks before, and under previous governments of both colours, and these savings are very rarely made, so you'll have to factor that in to the negotiations with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, whoever that may be, in the forthcoming spending round. And I take that to be a very significant point he's made about the next spending round.
Well, I always welcome the contributions of the Right Honourable Gentleman, not least because they are always thoughtful and constructive. I understand why he's raised the point in the way that he has. Resetting the programme to deliver this transformation has forced some challenging but necessary decisions involving the cutting of consultants and the cutting of the civil service headcount by 15%, as well as an increased use of technology to drive innovation. There have been some tough choices. I thought it was the right thing to do to be honest about those, but very happy to discuss them with him further.
Sonia Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Modern warfare has evolved from traditional mass troops to online cyber and drone-enabled conflict. We've seen this from the attack on M&S and Jaguar Land Rover. And last September, I saw firsthand at a drone factory in Ukraine How is the government using the Defence Investment Plan to develop our own sovereign digital and technological capabilities learned from Ukraine's war?
Secretary of State.
Well, she's absolutely right to raise concerns in the way that she has, not least in terms of the threat that we face every single day from cyber. In my previous role, I spent a lot of time ensuring that we were coordinated across government, the Cabinet Office, the Home Office and other government departments. This Defence Investment Plan provides the resource to make sure that we have the right resource and the right capabilities to meet the emerging threat that we are dealing with on a daily basis. Cyber is a key point of that, and what I've done is refocus and sharpen some of the capabilities in order to be able to deploy them sooner than would otherwise have been the case. There's always a balance between the shorter and the longer term, but I'm confident that this plan gives us the right capabilities when we need them.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a tale of two dips. The first dip is covered by the period in the current spending review up to about 2030, and the second dip is the bit beyond that from 2030 to 2035. And the first has detailed spending commitments and the latter has quite vague spending commitments. The former has small investments and the latter has big investments. I'll give you two examples. Air, 28 billion versus 70 billion. Land, 19 billion versus 36 billion. So can the Secretary of State guarantee to the House on behalf of the government, no matter who might be in it by that point, that the Treasury has guaranteed those figures and they will be in the next spending review? That is, that the defence section of the next spending review has already been written.
Secretary of State.
Well, with great respect to him, I know that he will understand it isn't for me to make guarantees on behalf of other government departments, including, of course, the Treasury. I don't think any minister would be in a position to do that outside of the Treasury. What I can guarantee him, I know that he thinks carefully about these matters, what I can guarantee him is that in the time that I've had available, I've looked very carefully at the mix of capabilities contained within the plan. I have made a number of changes in order to deliver capabilities that I thought were required sooner rather than later. Has that involved making some difficult choices? Yes, it has. Has it involved cutting some capabilities? Yes, it has. But what I have to do is right by defence and satisfy myself with the resource that we've got available, that we put the right capabilities in place that will allow us to operate alongside our allies in a very dangerous world. That is not an easy process, which I hope that he will acknowledge, but I hope that he will also acknowledge that today's investment plan does represent an important step forward, but as I have consistently said, there is still a requirement to spend more on defence.
Derek Twigg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, can I thank the Secretary of State for the opportunity to actually read the DIP this morning in the reading room, and there'll be some important questions that will need to be answered on that. Now, it's clear that the last government left the armed forces in a poor state, and this government has been doing all it can to try and repair some of that. But for me, the key question is this. Given the threats we face today, both globally and in Europe, and the state of the world economy and other threats that exist, does this meet those threats and provide us with the security and defence capability that this country should need at this time? And my view is that it clearly doesn't. And I think we've got to make a much greater contribution in the sense we need to get to 3% by the end of this Parliament. We need to start a plan to get that. Otherwise, I'll just finish on this, Madam Deputy Speaker, it also leaves a great deal of uncertainty in the defence industrial base about their ability to ramp up and meet those requirements and upskill as well.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to him, not least for the work that he does on the Intelligence and Security Committee and his previous service in the department. So I take very seriously the points that he's made. And he's right to highlight the nature of the threats that we face as a country. That's why, in addition to the work that we're doing with defence, it's incredibly important that we ensure that activity is joined up across government to ensure that wider resilience and that wider societal response. And that is work underway with the Cabinet Office. He did make a point about uncertainty with regard to industry. The truth of the matter is that the publication of this plan today will ensure that there is greater certainty for our industry partners who we now want to work closely with. We rely on them to be able to manufacture the capabilities that we require to keep our country safe. This is a big shot in the arm for UK industries, and I look forward to working very closely with the defence industries in the months and hopefully years to come in order to make sure that we are buying British, that we are taking their capabilities and deploying them to meet the nature of the threat that we face.
Sir Desmond Swain.
In what year will we reach 3%?
Secretary of State.
In the next Parliament.
Richard Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Reindustrialisation and backing British are the hallmarks of this defence investment plan. Does the Secretary of State agree with me and with GMB and Unite Unions that it's not only ships that need to be built in Britain, it's also new floating docks for Faslane? So whether you agree that Project Euston should be built by the skilled workforce at the Methil Yard in my constituency?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to him for his advocacy of this very important programme, which I've been briefed on and have already discussed it with the General Secretary of the GMB. I know that he will understand that I need to look very carefully at the detail of it, and therefore I'm not in a position to make a commitment about it from the dispatch box. A decision will be forthcoming, but I'm very keen to discuss it with him further.
Danny Kruger.
Madam Deputy Speaker, with this new money, the defence budget is due to rise by about £17 billion a year over the next 4 years. In that same period, the welfare budget is going to rise by about £60 billion. That's almost the whole defence budget just in the increase in welfare spending. General Barrons, who co-authored the Government Strategic Defence Review, said in response to today's announcement that we are not keeping up with our allies or with our enemies. So does he acknowledge that the government has failed to fund the Strategic Defence Review and has left us dangerously exposed, particularly at sea? He talks about spending wisely. Well, how much of the money, Madam Deputy Speaker, how much of the money that the government has announced is going to be spending will go on SMEs, not on the big primes that have delivered us programmes like Ajax?
State.
Well, I genuinely welcome a question from the honourable member, not least because it is often the case that there are no members of his party in attendance for defence debates. I just sort of say gently to him that he, I think, has previously made the point that he represents more members of the armed forces in his constituency than anyone else. I therefore think not unreasonable to have a sort of slightly more constructive dialogue about these things. I hope he will consider that for the future.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the home of the Royal Navy, Portsmouth welcomes Defence Investment Plan. Investment in hybrid navy, at least 6 new warships, and the biggest upgrade to our naval base for 45 years. It will strengthen national security in a new era of warfare and support skilled jobs. But ships and technology, Madam Deputy Speaker, are not enough. So will the Minister meet with me to set out how the government will ensure the necessary skills and training are in place to build and sustain this high-tech force, and confirm that he will continue to work at pace to improve armed forces housing and keep our personnel at the heart of this plan?
Secretary of State.
Well, she's right to raise the importance of our people and making sure that they are properly supported. I know that as a local member of Parliament for Portsmouth, she takes these matters very seriously, and of course, yes, we'd be delighted to meet with her.
Dr Neil Shastri-Hurst.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In response to the dip, the noble Lord Hutton, a former Labour Defence Secretary, said the centres of resistance across Whitehall to extra defence spending have allowed to prosper, and they haven't been overcome. As a consequence, he went on to say, that our armed forces will not be war-ready by the end of this Parliament. Does the Defence Secretary disagree with the noble Lord, and how does the cuts of £10.7 billion to the MOD budget enhance our armed forces readiness?
Secretary of State.
Well, I pay tribute to Lord Hutton for the work that he did when he was the Defence Secretary, and of course we listen very carefully to all those who take a view about the policies that we've brought forward. But I think it is not unreasonable to reiterate the commitment that we have made today: 298 billion, 15 billion of new money contained within this defence investment plan, and an increase in real terms of 27% by 29-30. That demonstrates a real commitment, but do we need to do more? Yes, I've been consistently clear that we do. We will be listening to Lord Hutton and others in terms of sort of shaping that debate, but I'm confident that the next spending review will provide the resources we need to meet the targets that we've committed to achieve.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my honourable friend for the statement? But also, as he said, this is a welcome shot in the arm for our defence and security sector, and he talked about the defence export funding that would be available, which of course is extremely important because so many nations around the world really rate our kit and our expertise in these sectors. Slightly concerned about what he was saying on home defence, but can I just leave him with this final question? That is really about the future funding and what I see as the importance of the Defence, Security and Resilience Bank. And perhaps he could just say a few more words about where he thinks we are on that.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to him for the important work that he does chairing his select committee, and I agree with the sort of the thrust that the point he was making about defence supporting growth. And I know that he will be really proud that we have got a Labour government generating good jobs, bringing forward a defence investment plan that is good for our economic security as well as for our national security. He will have heard the remarks that I made earlier about taking a little bit of time to look at the various proposals from our allies and from others about how we might seek to fund further defence investment. I'll take a bit of time to do that, but as ever, very happy to discuss it further with him.
Dame Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Royal Navy is spending millions of pounds on private accommodation and hotels each year, while entire buildings and accommodation blocks behind the wire of their estate sits rotting and uninhabitable. I can't say exactly how many millions because I've submitted questions on this to the MOD and they're refusing to answer. I don't know if the Secretary of State can help me with that. But I wanted to speak about the £9 billion that will be spent on defence housing over 10 years. What's the spend profile on this? How much of that is going to be in the first 2 years? Because if that is back-ended to year 10, it does absolutely nothing to stem the flow of wasted cash and provide our service personnel and their families with decent, habitable homes.
State.
I would just gently say to the Right Honourable Lady that there was a massive lack of investment in defence housing under the previous government. She will have heard the remarks that I made earlier about the commitment to investing £9 billion over 10 years. That is a real-term increase in each year.
Anna Geldert.
Harass, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I very much welcome today's announcement and the multi-billion-pound investment in HM Naval Base Devonport. Given the scale of this opportunity, can the Minister outline how the Government will work with communities across the Tamar in South East Cornwall to ensure they play a full part in delivering the programme with the skills, apprenticeships and jobs it will create by connecting local businesses into defence supply chains and resilient transport connectivity? This will strengthen the regional economy and deliver for our national defence capabilities.
State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree absolutely with the points that she makes. It will require a team effort to make sure that Devonport gets the support that it needs and that we will want to provide. But I know myself and ministerial colleagues would be very happy to discuss it with her further.
Dr Al Pinkerton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, since we've been in the Chamber, it's been reported online that senior military personnel are deeply unhappy with the DIP, and indeed the Chief of the Defence Staff asked the Secretary of State to remove a line that suggested that he personally backed this plan. Would the Secretary of State confirm whether he had to remove that line from his speech today?
Secretary of State.
That isn't correct. All of the chiefs support the DIP.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this investment in our defence, and can my right honourable friends say just how much the hollowing out of our defence spending under the previous government has made it difficult to build the capacity to spend this money.
Secretary of State.
I think my honourable friend makes an important point, and I never come here with the intention of politicising these matters. It's always my approach to engage on a cross-party basis and in the national interest. And that's precisely why, in my opening remarks, I didn't once mention the record of the previous government. I spoke only about the investment being made by this government. I think that is the right approach. I hope that on these important matters relating to the security of our nation, we can try and have a constructive debate. That absolutely will be the way that I wish to proceed, but where members opposite seek to critique the government's record, and it's entirely their right to do so, I think not unreasonable to remind them of their record.
Ben Obsi-Jecty.
RF Whitton is in my constituency, and as such I have a huge amount of service housing, both the RF Whitton and RF Brampton, former RF Brampton patches, and so service housing is extremely important to me. But could the Secretary of State confirm Is he cutting £300 million from the service family accommodation budget in this Parliament and moving it into the next Parliament?
Secretary of State.
Look, I know my honourable and gallant friend takes these matters really seriously, and I was grateful that he came into the department for a briefing this morning. He will have heard what I've said previously about investment in defence housing. He will understand the priority that we attach to that. He and I both know the value and the importance of making sure those people who serve have got the accommodation that they need, not least when they're operationally deployed. We have a moral responsibility to make sure that their families are looked after. We're investing £9 billion over 10 years with a real terms increase in each year.
Gerald Jones.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I very much welcome this defence investment plan and the confidence it shows in the workers on the Ajax programme at General Dynamics in Merthyr Tydfil. I thank ministers for their engagement with myself, with General Dynamics and the workforce. The DIP provides an opportunity for investment in further job opportunities, and communities like Merthyr Tydfil and Aberdeen have often felt left behind since deindustrialisation. So can I ask the Secretary of State, what does the DIP mean for communities like these in terms of new employment opportunities and support for export opportunities too?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to him because he makes an important point about ensuring that the money that we are investing touches communities right around the country, including his own. I know that we're due to spend £1.1 billion in the next 4 years on the Ajax project, which will have a real kind of meaningful impact on his constituency and for his constituents. I'm really proud that the investment that we brought forward today will create 60,000 jobs right around the country. That's good for our national security, that's good for our economy, and that's good for jobs up and down the nation.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Whereas our decisions taken in Whitehall mean the Welsh Government's capital budget is already set to fall 9% in real terms by 2029. Today we learnt the UK Treasury will further cut that capital budget by many millions to fund the Defence Investment Plan. And of course the plan is important, but surely it mustn't come at the expense of essential Welsh infrastructure like new NHS surgical hubs to help cut waiting lists, which are of course the legacy of Labour in Wales. And before he comes back with investments later in Wales, his latest figures show that defence contract spending is £1,130 per head in South West England compared to £340 for Wales. So can he confirm exactly how much capital money Wales will lose and agree that the Welsh Government needs stronger powers to protect Wales from stronger borrowing powers to protect Wales from abrupt UK spending cuts?
Project. Well, let me say to the right honourable lady that that's precisely why we've got the defence growth deal in Wales, and I give her a commitment that we'll work with the new government in Wales to deliver upon it.
Clive Betts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I welcome the Secretary of State's commitment to buy British and create British jobs? Could I ask him when he comes to produce his further strategy in the autumn on procurement? He tries to get a joined-up approach across government to procurement, important to our industrial strategy. The MOD is investing £1 billion plus into Sheffield Forgemast to create the capacity to build nuclear reactors for our submarines. Yet at the same time, Rolls-Royce are purchasing the same sorts of nuclear reactors in South Korea to go into civil nuclear plant. Haven't we got to get that sorted out to make sure these, right across government, we're doing British industry proud and buying British products to create British jobs?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to him and very grateful to all of those who work at Sheffield Forgemasters for the important work that they do, and I hope to visit in the very near future. He makes an important point about the need to buy British, and that is what we will seek to do. But in terms of the other points that he's made, let me have a look at them for him.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State will be very well aware of the central role that Porton Down has played in our nation's security and history, both UK Health Security Agency and DSTL. So I welcome the announcement of an additional £580 million to build a new biological lab to protect against biological threats. But would the Secretary of State undertake to examine how this aligns with his government's decision to move the UK HSA out of the vicinity of Porton and the announcement last year on biosecurity centres to ensure that the money that has been invested will be spent wisely, aligned to other commitments made?
Well, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for his advocacy of Porton Down, and I seem to remember that the last time I visited I bumped into him on the station in Salisbury and we discussed it then. I think he will know that there is a long-standing commitment from the UK government to invest in DSTL. I think there are hundreds of millions of pounds of commitment to the infrastructure which will benefit Porton Down. In terms of the specific points that he's made, let me take them away, I'll look at them and come back to him.
Damien Egan. Speaker, ground-to-air missile defences are listed as one of the major long-term investments, but not until 2030 to 2035. Given how important missile defences are in modern warfare and NATO's warnings to be prepared for the end of this decade, is this not one of the examples where, to be war-ready, funding should be brought forward, not least for military sites and sites of critical national infrastructure, but also for our towns and cities too? Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to him. I can tell him that we are buying low-cost effectors, and in terms of his second point, he's right, and I'll come back to him with more detail, but my understanding is that we are doing that.
Dr. Ellie Chowns.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Speaker, what matters is not just how much we spend on defence, but what we spend it on. Do the government's choices offer good value for money? And so I'm deeply concerned that more than half the capital budget is for the nuclear programme. More will be spent on a handful of submarines and unusable warheads than on every single other bit of kit and technology for all the armed forces all together. Does he not recognise the glaring inconsistency between his rhetoric about a flexible, agile, future-focused armed forces and the reality of pouring billions of good money after bad into the black hole of Cold War technology instead of investing in true security?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree with one thing the Honourable Lady said, which is that it does matter what we spend the money on, and she's right about that. I think we part company at that point, not least because I'm not entirely clear what her party's policy is with regard to membership of NATO, but not ever so long ago they were advocating departing. The only people who would welcome that would be Putin and his cronies in Russia.
Dame Chian Murrah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the increased investment in defence, which should not only ensure our security, but also drive economic growth. And with that in mind, could my honourable friend reassure me that, firstly, the Ministry of Defence is capable of procuring innovation innovatively with the support of our nation's start-ups and scale-ups, and not focused on this bureaucratic long-term processes with which my committee is so familiar? And secondly, the North East sends the largest proportion of young people into the armed forces of any region in this country, and yet it has the lowest proportion of defence spending. That is unacceptable, and the Defence Investment Plan has no place-based programmes apart from the defence growth zones, and the North East is missing out on that. So what is he going to do to ensure that the North East commitment is rewarded with investment?
I think the Honourable Lady makes important points. I can tell her that we are investing 400 million a year for UK defence innovation, and I hope and I'm sure that she will welcome that. I thought she made an important point about how we direct spend towards the North East, not least given the long track record it has of sending people to serve in our armed forces. I think that is an entirely reasonable challenge. I know that is one that the department is considering, but I look forward to discussing with her further.
I'm only going to be able to run the statement until 4:15, so members really are going to have to ask much shorter questions. Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Mid-Buckinghamshire is proudly home to RAF High Wycombe and RAF Halton. So given everything in the Defence Investment Plan on aircraft, on drone innovation, on the space field, coupled with the Secretary of State's absolutely correct commitment to our defence personnel, training is critical. RAF Halton has been on a roller coaster of closure as a training base. Where does the Defence Investment Plan sit with the long-term future of RAF Halton?
Well, let me make a point of consensus. He's right to say that training is critical because it underpins our readiness. And that's precisely why I reprofiled some of the spend in order to ensure that we are able to maximise our readiness given the nature of the threats that we raise. In terms of the other points that he raised, I'll look carefully at them and, as I've done to him previously, come back to him.
Luke Murphy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I welcome the Defence Investment Plan and the additional investment announced today? Too many defence SMEs locally tell me how difficult it is to navigate the defence procurement system and to win contracts. Can the Secretary of State set out how they will be able to benefit from this investment and then for us to benefit from their skills and expertise?
Secretary of State.
I think Honourable Friend makes a really important point, and that's why we've launched the Defence Office of Small Business Growth. That, I think, provides a part of the answer to the question that he has raised, but my ministerial colleague has listened carefully to the points that he's made and know we'll want to engage with him further on it.
Chris Coughlin.
Mr. Speaker, 80% of US and UK historic war borrowing has been repaid not through debt repayments but through economic growth. Draghi has urged the EU to borrow for defence R&D to increase economic growth and repay debt. So does the Prime Minister's statement this morning, ruling out extra borrowing for defence, not only risk our national defence but our economy too?
Secretary of State.
Well, I think it is important, as I know that he does, to understand the symbiotic relationship between national security and economic growth. This government has been incredibly keen to ensure that we are able to make progress with both of those areas. There's an obvious clear connection between the two. But our strong sense is that it would be deeply irresponsible to bring forward measures that we weren't able to evidence how we're going to pay for them. All of the items that we brought forward in the Defence Investment Plan is underpinned by resource, and we can point out to where actually that money is going to come from. We think that that is the responsible way to proceed. And that is why there is the clarity about the next spending review being the appropriate fiscal moment to make a contribution that will get us to the trajectory of 3 and then 3.5%. The easier option would be to make commitments that we couldn't evidence how we were going to pay for them. That would provide perhaps some short-term sugar rush, but it wouldn't be the right way to proceed. And that is why I've come here to say that, yes, we will honour the commitments that we've made to NATO allies about the trajectory to 3.5%, but the appropriate way to do that is in the context of the next spending review and not in this Defence Investment Plan.
Catherine McKinnell.
Thank you. As the UK trade envoy to Italy, I thank the Secretary of State for confirming the GCAP programme funding in his statement today. As MP for Newcastle North, I add my voice to those that want to see this as an opportunity to genuinely spread investment, opportunity that will build strength and resilience in our people right across the UK that are our greatest sovereign asset. The North East currently receives £70 of MOD funding. It's a tenth, less than a tenth of what goes in other parts of the UK. That's a wasted opportunity and one that we must grasp to make sure that we genuinely build resilience. So I look forward to hearing from him how we can work together to pull that investment up to our region as a test bed for it reaching the whole of the UK.
Well, I'm grateful for the work that she does with Italy, who is a key ally, and I'm grateful that she's welcomed the announcement of the commitment to GCAP, which was signed by the Prime Minister just recently. Her second point is absolutely right. She should challenge us and hold us to account on that. She will have heard, I hope, the response I gave to a relatively near neighbour just a few moments ago. I look forward to working with them both on that particular matter.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the right honourable member opposite for what he's doing in what I'm sure is a very challenging and uncertain time. With regards to meeting NATO spending commitments, he's referred to future spending reviews on many occasions. Is it not the case that this defence investment plan is a bit like the government, cast adrift and waiting for someone else in the future to make the hard decisions?
Secretary of State.
I don't think it's like that at all.
Luke Akehurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm particularly concerned about missile and drone threats to the UK. So I welcome the 790 million that's in the DIP for additional air and missile defence capabilities. And I wonder if the Secretary of State could give a little more detail about what additional capabilities will be added to our existing layered air defences.
Dave.
Well, I know that my honourable friend has consistently raised points in the way that he has today, and I'm grateful for him for doing so. In the interests of time and not causing further ire with Madam Deputy Speaker, let me say that given the points that he's raised and his interest in it, we'll bring him into the department and give him a brief on the work that we're doing.
Rebecca Smith.
Speaker, I've asked before about the future of the amphibious fleet. The replacements for HMS Bulwark and Albion was reassured that the multi-role strike ships were forthcoming. Ministers reassured that government would recapitalise the Royal Navy's amphibious fleet with these new vessels ready to replace existing RFAs by 2033. Now, the DIP implies that they're no longer being pursued. So is this the case? And if so, does this change in plan mean delayed delivery and a capability gap for our amphibious forces?
I just gently say to her that under the previous government, Albion and Bulwark were tied up, never to go to sea again. But I think she would have heard the point I made earlier on about the deal with the Netherlands, and I hope that she'll welcome that.
Kevin Bonavere.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Both the Prime Minister and many others have said that this country needs to be ready for an attack on NATO by Russia by 2030. So every step this country takes is critical, and I welcome today's plan. We must mobilise everything we can, including our industry. Therefore, I would ask the Secretary of State or a Minister of the Defence team to meet me to see how the Defence Centre in Stevenage, MBDA, Airbus and our SMEs can benefit from the new defence export facility. Thank you.
Secretary of State.
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, we'd be very happy to do that.
Adam Dance.
Madam Deputy Speaker, page 68 of the DIP makes clear that Proteus being developed at Leonardo and Yeovil will be key to future warfare, but lots of other SMEs doing cutting-edge defence work in Yeovil tell me their hiring investment decisions have been trapped in limbo by delays to this plan. So what reassurance can the Secretary of State give Yeovil's other defence SMEs that the MOD actually has the money, backed up the research and development into advanced defence kits Yeovil defence sector is developing?
State.
Let me say to the honourable gentleman that the constituency that it represents has got very long-standing defence interests, and of course we want to work closely with him on that regard. I think he will acknowledge that there was £1 billion of investment for NMH and for other capabilities as well. But given the interest that he has as a local MP, we'd be very happy to discuss it with him further.
Tristan Osborne.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents in Chesham and Elford will welcome this defence investment plan, which is over £298 billion over the next 4 years. Of course, BAE Systems in my constituency is part of that programme of expansion and also the new jobs and opportunities it will bring for young people. Can the Minister confirm that the defence dividend will increase our sovereign capacity and give jobs and opportunities for all our people in this country?
Well, I can confirm that, and let me also take the opportunity to say how much we value the working relationship with BAE. They are a great company employing thousands of workers around the country, and we want to work very closely with him on the back of this plan.
Mark Pritchard.
Mr. Speaker, pay tribute to the Right Honourable Gentleman for Rawmarsh and Conisbrough in ensuring an extra £15 billion for the defence budget. A man, Madam Deputy Speaker, in my view, with honour, integrity and principle. And can I add also the Honourable Member for Selly Oak, who additionally is a man of a supreme gallantry. And I respect the fact that they resigned on a point of principle, but of course we are still £13 billion short. So what reassurance can the Defence Secretary give to my constituents at RAF Cosford, who are looking to see their housing refurbished and replaced over the next few years? Is that programme still safe? And also those working on the Boxer and Challenger 3 vehicle programmes. I understand moving to autonomous vehicles, but are those programmes safe at Telford?
I always listen very carefully to the Right Honourable Gentleman. He's made a number of entirely reasonable points based on constituency interests. I think rather than run through all of them now, I'd be very happy to get back to him with a more detailed response.
Jessica Toll.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Dorset has a proud armed forces tradition and can play a critical role in delivering our defence ambitions. We have a strong ecosystem of cutting-edge drone technology companies at the Dorset Innovation Park and a pipeline of skills and talents coming out of Bournemouth University and Bournemouth and Poole College. So can the Secretary of State confirm that the DIP will back the businesses and the institutions in my region to drive forward innovation and deliver the skills our defence industries need?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to her, and I understand that the Dorset Innovation Park is excellent, and I can confirm that as a consequence of the investment that this government is making through the Defence Investment Plan, there will be a whole range of opportunities for the kind of businesses that she represents in her constituency and right around the country. As I say, I'm hugely proud that we will be generating 60,000 jobs and creating economic growth in every corner of the country, including Dorset.
Joe Mayhew.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's quite clear that the Secretary of State knows that we need to be spending a lot more on defence than he's currently been able to announce in this Defence Investment Plan. So in writing the DIP, what assumption did he make about the status and future of the Chagos Islands? Does he agree with me that the £30+ billion that his government intends to pay to the government of Mauritius would be better spent on our defence?
Well, Diego Garcia is important for our national defence, but the assumptions that I've had to make is to ensure that we've got the right capabilities at the right time, given the nature of the world that we're operating in. I don't think anybody disputes that the world is a very difficult, complex and dangerous place. It is the job of defence and of the UK government to make sure that we've got the right resource and the right capabilities. That's why I've been working hard to secure more resource. That's why I've sharpened the list of capabilities that we have. And that's why I've been working with Treasury colleagues to make sure that at the next spending review, defence will be the #1 priority.
Chris Webb.
Speaker. The £50 billion defence export facility to support British defence business is welcome and will create jobs in my constituency in Blackpool South and across Lancashire. But can my right honourable friend expand on this further, and if this fund can be used to place orders of Typhoon now ahead of selling to our allies so the production line can continue in Tempest, and will he agree to meet with me and all Lancashire colleagues to discuss this further?
Secretary of State.
Grateful to him. My ministerial colleague will be very happy to meet with him.
Andrew Snowden.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And following on from my neighbour in Blackpool South, I'm obviously very disappointed to see a Typhoon order for the RAF is not in this document, which would be worth around £8 billion, which is the single biggest way the government, through this plan, through the aerospace industry, could invest in British jobs. There is a line for £5.4 billion for Typhoon on page 44, but on page 45 it says that only 1.1 billion of that is new funding. So what is the other 4.3 billion attached to the Typhoon platform actually for in this document?
Secretary of State.
Well, I can say to him, and he will see this from the document, that we're investing 300 million in CCA's order. But if he's got further concerns and he would like to discuss them with myself or a ministerial colleague, we'd be very happy to do that.
Brian Leishman.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, the Secretary of State spoke about different political priorities and tough decisions being made, but today we've seen departmental budget cuts to fund this extra £15 billion for war preparedness. Now, in this chamber we talk a lot about defending our values, but what values are we actually defending when 14% of children in the UK are living in food insecurity? We're a nation with crumbling infrastructure, and we've got over 3 million people needing food banks to survive.
Secretary of State.
Our defence spending will mean billions of pounds of investment in Scotland, which will create good jobs for people in Scotland and including his constituency. That's something I'm very proud of. The government has had to make tough decisions. We've been honest about those because we have to ensure that we've got the resource to invest in the capabilities that we need to keep the country safe. Those are the choices that we have taken. We've taken them in the best interests of our country. I'm afraid that not everyone will always agree with them, but that is the nature of these things. But I've got to do right by defence, right by our armed forces, right by the nation, and I'm content that this Defence Investment Plan, a copy of which we will be placing in the library, the House, does that.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. £300 billion increase in defence expenditure paid for by every single government department. He's right to say there is a world of insecurity and a world of conflict out there. Where is the foreign policy strategy? Where is the policy about reducing tensions? Where is the policy to try and bring about ceasefires in the terrible wars that are going on? Where's the policy for dealing with the real insecurities of the world, climate change, global inequality and poverty?
State.
Well, I recognise that the Right Honourable Gentleman and I are unlikely to agree on the best approach with regard to expenditure and defence. But I hope that he will firstly recognise that we have actually published the Defence Diplomacy Strategy, and we do work very closely across government to align our resources and make sure that we are contributing responsibly along with our international allies. We take our obligations very seriously, not least as a leading member of NATO. But fundamentally, this government has an absolute requirement to make sure that we safeguard our national security. That is a priority for this, and I hope for any government. And we have to make sure that we've got appropriate levels of resource in order to do that. That does require prioritisation, and it does require difficult decisions. And that's what we've done.
Alex Barros-Curtis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for the statement, and I particularly look forward to learning more about the Uncrewed Systems Task Force. Can he confirm, though, when it comes to the Welsh defence industry, today's defence investment plan will work in tandem with commitments already in train, such as the Wales Defence Growth Deal, which are there to nurture and develop the Welsh defence industry?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to him. Yes, I can give him those assurances.
Wendy Morton.
Deputy Speaker, too little, too late. This will be the legacy of this Labour government. Earlier today, the Prime Minister admitted that capital projects, including roads and energy infrastructure, will no longer go ahead as planned to pay for this package. In the interest of transparency, can the Minister tell the House which projects in the West Midlands will now be delayed or cancelled? And does he not agree with me that it would be far better to get a grip of Labour's ballooning, out-of-control welfare bill than to cut the infrastructure that our regions need?
State.
I hope, I'm trying to help the Right Honourable Lady out here, this Defence Investment Plan has brought forward £15 billion of new investment. It sits alongside a commitment to spend £298 billion. It represents a 27% real terms increase. I would just gently invite her to review the record of the government that she was a part. This government is putting the resource that we need in place to secure our national security. I hope it is a shared endeavour across this House, even if not everybody is necessarily signed up to the plan.
Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the UK Trade Envoy to Japan, I strongly welcome the £8.6 billion to the GCAP and Tempest project. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that this is a clear vote of confidence that will enable project partners in our country, in Japan and Italy, to make strong headway with this project at last?
State.
Well, I'm grateful to him, not least because it provides me with the opportunity of saying how much we value the relationship and the constructive partnership that we have with our friends in Japan, and I've engaged with my opposite number on a number of occasions over the past couple of weeks. GCAP is about building a sixth-generation fighter jet for the UK. This will take some time, and the programme is in its early stages, but it is already generating 4,500 jobs now, with many more jobs that will come online in due course. That is a good investment on behalf of the UK, and we very much welcome the partnership relationship that we have both with Japan and Italy.
Alicia Cairns.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this money risks landing after the danger because it backloads most of spending until after 2030. What if Russia rearms before 2030? Or what if Xi Jinping does as the Chinese Communist Party says it will and invades Taiwan in the next 2 years? Will this plan give us what we need to protect us, given that we would have to step up and defend the whole of Europe as the US, of course, moved its focus to the Indo-Pacific?
Secretary of State.
I think she's right to raise concerns about the nature of the threat. It absolutely needs to focus the minds of all of us and our European and NATO partners. That's why we've brought forward this defence investment plan. That's why we've made sure that the capabilities that are in place will deliver the effect that we need as early as possible. I agree with the concerns that she's expressed about the nature of the threat that we face from Russia, and as she and I have debated on numerous occasions, other states as well. What we have to do is marshal the resources and the capabilities to make sure that we are best prepared working alongside our allies. That is what this defence investment plan will do, but I accept the basic point that we will want and need to do more.
Final question, short. Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm presuming everything that we do now, including defence spend, will help clear the pathway into a reindustrialised nation. And I understand that rewiring Britain is to include parity between academic and technical routes. So does the Minister agree that for the Defence Investment Plan to succeed, we need to skill up our nation, and that includes 2 Defence Excellence Colleges for Scotland and West College Scotland and West Northamptonshire?
Well, yes, I completely agree with the point that he has made. I think it's important to underline that we are looking for some financial support from the SNP in terms of those colleges, but he's right to make the point in the way that he does. And I'm really proud that the investment that we've brought forward today will invest in communities right across the country and generate 60,000 jobs around the UK.
Can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement this afternoon?